Welcome to the Transforming Lives panel, the podcast where inspiration and transformation converge. Each week, we come together to explore the depths of personal growth and life-changing experiences. Come along with us as we deep dive into personal stories. Through intimate conversations, our guests and panel reveal the pivotal moments that have defined their paths, shown their strengths, and formed their passions. We are so happy you are here, and we welcome you to our circle where empathy and empowerment are always at the forefront.
Welcome to another episode of the Transforming Lives panel podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sharmin, and Mitzy is also here with me, and we have a special guest. But before we get into the podcast, just join me in taking a few deep breaths so that we can be grounded and centered for the next 30 to 45 minutes with our guests, and we can be present. So take a deep breath in and hold that breath and just feel that breath wherever in your body. And as you exhale, let go of any tension, anything that can keep you distracted for the time you will be spending with us. Let go of the things to do. Let go of the stress that occurred during the day. Just let go of everything and be present with us. And we want to thank you for being here with us. We want to thank you for taking your time to spend with us. And today we have a special guest. Guaman is a mindset and performance coach dedicated to helping leaders and entrepreneurs optimize their time and financial resources while maintaining balance and minimizing stress. Drawing on a diverse background, Luis leverages over a decade of experience in sales, leadership, and coaching to drive transformation and growth. During his illustrious career, Luis successfully managed a door-to-door sales company in Times Square for 3 years, honing his skills, acumen, and business acuity. Additionally, he brings 27 years of martial arts practice into his coaching approach, integrating the discipline and philosophy of this ancient art into his strategies. We're going to talk about that, Luis. Welcome to the Transforming Lives panel podcast. Is there anything you would like to add to your bio?
No, you're very generous with your introduction. It was very well said. Thank you very much for having me, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're being our guest.
Excited to be here.
So, my first question, how do you incorporate your martial arts experience into your coaching business?
Sure. So, martial arts is an art, right? It's within the name. And I think a lot of people, right, both men and women, have actually lost their way in terms of looking at the artistry within their work. And so work is only an extension of what we do. But the fact is that there is artistry in the individual. So whatever it is that we are working on, whatever it is that we are doing, there's art within that. And everyone who's a classical artist, I have my friends who are painters, who are dancers. I mean, we talk about these things all the time. But a lot of people in the classical business only mindset, right? They are not seeing that often. So how I integrate martial arts with business are these concepts that flow within all kinds of art, within every kind of art, with how we're expressing ourselves mentally, physically, verbally, emotionally within the action. So the action is business, right? So some of these business actions can be how we communicate with other people, how we set standards with other people, how we set boundaries with other people, how we manage our time, our mental capacity, how we manage our energy, and all these things then create the results we're looking for, which are usually time, money, relationships to a certain depth. So that is how it all connects. That's the short version of it.
Thank you. Thank you for
I would
that.
imagine that the discipline from being in martial arts also really comes into it, because it's a lot of it is about mindset and focus and keeping the specific goal firmly on your eye. Like, is that accurate?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And a quick mini example of that is I was speaking with somebody an hour ago, coaching with someone, and it was this gentleman who is good at a lot of things, but one thing, let's say, would be waking up on time, is something that he didn't need to do. And was not good at that for a long time. And when I mean waking up on time, I mean waking up, being energized to wake up, looking forward to get up, not just, okay, this is what we have to do, and we're gonna just get out of bed because we have to. Like, no, I worked on myself for that small part of my day, the beginning, for about 8 years, because as a kid I used to grow up with my dad just ripping off the blankets off of me, and so it's always just, I go to school, I don't want to get up, I just want to stay comfortable in my bed. So I had to change all these little things, so then now I can wake up at 7:30, I could wake up at 6:30, I could wake up at 8 o'clock whenever I choose, because I have a certain system how I'm deciding to wake up in a positive, energetic way. So that's part of discipline, and you need discipline to build that. But thankfully, even if you don't have it now, this is for anyone who's listening, even if you don't have it now, it can be built, and that's part of what I help with too.
And what are some techniques, strategies that one can use to wake up with that burst of energy, like you mentioned?
Sure. So I'm going to mention two things. Like, I'm going to go specific, and then but first let's talk broadly. So broadly, there's a huge amount of techniques that can work. There's so many things that you can just do. And do I need an app? Do I need a certain alarm? Do I need my rooster or something? If you live by a farm, that stuff is real. You can depend on other things outside of you, but I think the most fundamental thing, very specifically, that you should depend on first, very first, is the idea of, if I have nothing available to me, who am I when I'm with nothing available to me? Who am I during that time? Right? So if I don't have an alarm, if I don't have a rooster, if I don't have somebody to come in and wake me up, what would I need in order to feel like I'm energized to wake up? And so the answer to that, to give it to you guys, to give it to everyone, is it's a decision. You need to decide why you'd want to wake up in the morning. And so it sounds kind of basic, but it's really something I've really reflected on for a long time. And that's how I was able to create my answer. I created a space in the morning. So it was maybe 30 minutes. It could be 10 minutes, and it could be 5 minutes. And very seriously, it could be 5 minutes. It could be an hour. I usually take an hour, where in that time, I plan ahead of time, the day before, the night before, that this is my time to read. This is my time to watch a specific show or something like that. My time to have fun with something, my time to learn something. But I'm deciding what that time is, because that time is for me and me alone. And I'm waking up so then I can have my time. That is the first thing you should be playing with, So then you could make all the little complicated things on top of it, but that's the most important core of it.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that because about, I'm going to say 3 years ago now, I decided that when I got up in the morning, the first thing I was going to do was walk around the house and get my 10,000 steps as something that was just kind of for me. And it was like, it was just for a variety of reasons, it wasn't convenient at that time to be going to the gym and whatever. So I was just like, I can literally just get out of bed and just start walking and get my steps in. And then probably about, it's probably about 8 months ago, maybe a year ago, at night, I started saying to myself, you know, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to feel energized and ready. And I'm going to, as you say, you know, walk and watch some TV shows that I like while I'm walking up, like, and made that my time so that I'm programming myself at night as to what time I want to get up and exciting myself to get up because the first thing I do is something for me before all of the stuff starts to come. So it's really interesting that you sort of gave that as an example because it was like, oh, hey, I did that. So
You're doing the work. That's great. That is great.
it does work. Like it's amazing how just sort of taking that time before you go to bed to pre-program yourself. Like I'd say 99% of the time I wake up before the alarm goes off because I've mentally told myself that I'm getting up and it's working. Like and maybe it's because I have something to do for myself, like you were saying in that example.
Yes, to add to that, something that was just right at the beginning of this of our session now is how Sharmin, you held space beautifully for everyone listening and looking, watching. How often do you consciously, intentionally hold space for yourself, right? Is an important question. So we hold space for the things that we deem necessary. So family, responsibility, there's work, and these things that can literally, these mental things that can literally have a physical pressure on us when they feel encroached, right? When we feel like it's a lot. But if we're choosing, if we're deciding to have space that is for us, because there's so many parts, like the work, if you work at a typical office, you know, it's going to replace you if you're not there, right? No one's really going to give you the space that you need truly except for you, right? And so that's part of that practice too. And part of that is related to your first question of martial arts, how that relates to it also, because during the combative movement, the physical altercation in a safe place to practice within any art, within any martial arts form, you need to be able to have that space for the intimate interaction between you and a partner that who you're moving with, but also the space for yourself, because during that whole time, it's just you, right? Like, did I do this right? Am I good enough for this? Am I actually accomplishing the right thing? And then to have the space to reflect on that, that is the whole game. So that's part of also this whole morning routine, if you will.
Within martial arts, because I've never done any kind of martial arts, how much of what you accomplish within martial arts is because of the headspace and the mental focus versus the physical training of the movements or the actions or what have you? And how does that weave into coaching and business?
Right. I think there would be a trifecta on that, you know, much like most things in the human experience without getting too woo woo, you know, it's mind, body, and spirit put together, right? So essentially, it's almost an equal factor. So we could put it this way, that any person, no matter your previous experience, you were an artist, right? So I think a lot of people could say, okay, you know what, even though I never painted before, I can learn how to finger paint or put some in. Okay, I think I could get that. At that point, art is art, right? So if we understand that concept, then that means that we're taking a physical art, like becoming a dancer or becoming some kind of movement artist. Then all you need to do is be able to put the practice into, sure, what is the technique and what is the expression of that technique, right? So that's what it is. So as you get better at that technique, then your physical acumen, right? Your ability to do the physical part gets better as long as you keep doing that. What I just described is the same thing that happens in business. So when you need to have a technique, let's say communication ability, or let's say when you're talking about giving feedback to a specific kind of group of people, or your, let's say, leadership or not leadership, you need to have there are techniques to do so. And you are not good usually in the beginning, right? So I used to run a team of people and I was terrible at, let's say, sales and communication in different parts. But over several years of being able to hone this, understand, oh, okay, let's not focus so much on the technique. What comes before the technique? It comes your mentality around the technique, right? It comes about how am I thinking about my art? Okay. Because my art is not supposed to be the best of looking good. It's not supposed to be the main thing. The main thing is supposed to be being good, right? So it's supposed to be less of just action. It's supposed to be less of what the outcome is, and it's more supposed to be of who am I while this is happening, right? So how that relates to real world into, let's say, a communication example is maybe you're not the best technique. You didn't use the technique best for giving feedback or communicating with a colleague or employer employee. But if they can get where you're coming from, right? Hey, I'm trying to actually tell you this feedback, and you know what? Maybe I'm not saying it in the best way, but I mean these for the best intentions. I'm trying to learn just like you are, and you know what? I'm better at you in this, but you're better at me in this. And you know what? I'm just trying to get in the right direction, us aligned. They are going to respect that, right? And things are built, relationships, community is built on top of that. And so that's one example of how that can kind of relate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. My question is about minimizing stress because it's common. You hear it every day from even children these days. Mom, I'm feeling stressed, right? Um, what are some strategies, techniques that you use to help your clients to minimize stress in their lives and that you can share with us and our listeners?
One of the biggest things you can have is the ability to create boundaries, right? They're either strong boundaries or light boundaries, right? But they're there. And what precedes a boundary is a decision, of the individual, right? So a lot of people, when I explain giving boundaries, there's a camp of people just it's uncomfortable, or I don't want to, the people pleasing kind of thing. I don't want this person to feel bad or make or think that I mean ill of them. When what they're doing at that level is seeing just the one dimension of how they feel, but they're not seeing the relationship as a whole between them and the other person, because the other person might just want the best amount of output between both, the best outcome for both of them. And so anyway, there's a lot of layers to this, but creating a boundary and how you create a boundary is making the decision of saying what's okay and what is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk a lot more deeper on that, but that is what it is in a simplistic level. And to answer the question though, for how that relieves stress, is that you got to know how much you need of something, right? Everyone has mental fatigue by the end of the day, right? If you're going through your day and you're just doing all these things and maybe you can't handle something, if something else comes up, like from a family member or from something from work, then being able to understand that you're feeling this way, then after you understand, okay, maybe I shouldn't take more, then being able to communicate that with your colleague or with a family member. Hey, you know what? Let's not do this. I would rather take care of this tomorrow, or let's try this another time. Just understanding that and building the foundation for those boundaries, you could build other boundaries on top of it. Then when you build boundaries on boundaries, that turns into a system. And then it's easier to work with someone or easier to live with someone, even when you do that over time. That's how that works.
Thank you. Is it safe to say that boundaries are a protective I want to use the word protective blanket from stress. And since stress and trauma are on the same continuum, it could also be a protection for trauma.
Yes, I would say stress, just like trauma, is a milestone, not a milestone, a point of indication of self-knowledge, right? Just to understand yourself. So because you have this kind of stress doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just because you have this kind of trauma doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means who you are, at least in this moment, or what happened, right? So if you're having more, if you're diving more into just who you are, and this is even touching as to what I help my clients with, because a lot of clients, they come to me and they are misaligned. So whether they are maybe even a little bit newer in their business journey, or they're very, very experienced, 30 years plus of experience, that they are misaligned with, let's say, where they want to go in their business, or more so, just misaligned with how they want to show up for themselves on a regular basis. They want to make sure that they have their purpose aligned with the work that they are consistently doing, the effort, the energy that they are consistently doing, right? So it really is in line with what you're saying, with what you're mentioning for stress and even for trauma at times, because you need to set these boundaries, and it indicates what you should let go of little by little, what we should focus on little by little. And this is a way of how outcomes are also created.
Great. Thank you for that. Because oftentimes there's fear of setting boundaries because of whatever that fear might be. And I see boundaries as a protection for self. Thus, I ask that question because there's certain times if you don't have boundaries, you'll be hurt. Your stress levels would increase. So thus I asked that question, and thank you for answering that.
Yes. Yes. A quick reminder of that comes to mind, because what stress, right? How much is too much, right? Well, you kind of need to have more of the self-knowledge, more of the diving into who you are in different levels. So if you have water, everyone should be drinking water, right? I have water, right? It's important to drink water. Well, what happens if you have too much water? That's called drowning, right? At some level, at some extreme super level, yes, you could say that, sure, but that's just a silly example, because yeah, how much is too much? And water is a great thing, we should be having it. But that's the point. So many people get so overwhelmed by the notions, just the idea of a kind of stress, right? And then with their current level of how they handle it, the stress can be much bigger than it is, right? And it depends on the individual. So that's why this work is important. That's why self-reflection is important. That's why putting in this emotional regulation, this kind of discipline and everything to yourself first is important. And then you worry about work stuff and everything else will fall in line if you're helping yourself.
Could you talk with us a little bit about like what your process is like when you get a client, like sort of kind of talk a little bit about what your coaching looks like and what it is you do with people?
Sure. So it's energy management, time management, mindset, and there's a lot of details within that. But in the shortest amount of words, it's really being able to take someone and have them define where they're at now. Because I was just speaking with somebody, yesterday, that, you can make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money in a lot of different ways, just as one example. And you could do that while not having defined just your personal self and your emotional self as to how you got there in the first place, right? Like the things that make you tick as an individual, the things that are important to you emotionally, personally, because those things are important to the it's important to the why, right? It's important to the spirit, you could say. It's important to okay, this is why we're doing it. but you don't necessarily need to have those things if you just need to do XYZ in company to make money and just keep doing that over time. And then, we wind up wherever we wind up. But yeah, being able to take someone as to define where they're at, being able to speak about their emotional content, that as in how they feel about certain habits that are getting in their way, about certain mindsets, so self-imposed limitations that keep coming up for them over and over again, how they're lacking in certain discipline or certain alignment with something, and being able to have these conversations with them in depth, right, which is private, right, unless we're doing group coaching, and that's fine. Being able to navigate through these emotions, giving people the space, because that's also a big thing we do. Some people just come just for the space to be able to have a bouncing board, right? A mental board they could just bounce thoughts of, well, I think this is right, or you know what, I tried to do this, but it failed, and then have no one judge them, right? That's how often do you have that space going somewhere? Hey, I want to do XYZ. I actually didn't. This is often in terms of my emotional regulation, and this in terms of my practical skills is off, and I don't know what to do. There's no real places to have that just in mainstream, and let alone even for men. Men do not have that either. How often do you see men talking about their emotional state, emotional regulation as to how it relates to their practical output? But that's all of what I deal with. And I decided to really focus on that because I'm very passionate about it. And since, like I've been describing, I grew up with it, at least in my mind, for martial arts. And I'm like, wow, this is really needed for tons of people because it connects with business, which is what a lot of people are focused on. But a lot of people in business are trying to rediscover their inner workings, right? So their inner workings can be aligned with what they're doing. And so I do that with, like I said, the energy management, time management, mindset, and I guide them through these different parts, right? Like discipline and organization of self and maybe of time management, so then they can show up how they want to show up on a consistent basis, even when we stop working with each other.
And what are the benefits of group coaching versus one-on-one coaching? Because obviously when you're one-on-one, it's very personalized to what you need at that particular moment or what you're doing. But I think for some types of things, there's real benefit to being in a group, and for some types of things, there's real benefit for being one-on-one. Can you elaborate a little bit on those?
Exactly. For the audience, maybe to have a quick understanding, kind of like if you're having one-on-one personal trainer, right? As opposed to taking a group class, right? You get something different out of both, right? And it kind of is to your preference a little bit. But now when we're talking about, let's say, group coaching or one-on-one coaching, there's a heavy overlap. In fact, you could say that's what I'm doing now. Actually, I have several one-on-one clients, but also I created a men's group where it's only men, and I would like to create a women's group in the future, but I'm just focusing with one at a time, where men get in the same room together, and then we're talking about these different things. And so for one-on-one, we get to, of course, have that one-on-one contact. Maybe people don't want to have anyone hear what's going on, and that's completely fine. But if we're having the same exact conversations in a group setting, and if these people are following the same sequences, right? Let's say homework I call it action items. So they have action steps that they're doing every week, that they're coming in, okay, giving specific responses. They could see how other people are reacting to it. They won't feel as alone, right? Because I'm not the only person who's going through this, which are tons of people feel all the time. And they'll be able to see that, okay, other people are struggling too, or other people are asking questions that actually I didn't even think about asking that, but that's great that person asked it. So those are two of the biggest differences for those coaching models.
Thank you.
People typically like, a person likes to do both group and individual, or do you find that somebody kind of often, they much prefer group, or they much prefer one-on-one, or a mixture of both when you're working with clients?
Everyone just wants the outcome, which is what both are leading to, right? So sometimes people are going to say, you know what, I've I just had someone the other day, some that I was looking for something for group because because that person did a lot of therapy, right? He does therapy now, right? Okay, great. So I have a lot of one-on-one, but you know what? I wanted to be in a community or see some other people who are kind of doing the same thing. So he was veering towards that, right? But I've spoken to him one-on-one several times, still got a ton out of it. So I think people have their own preconceived notions, and there's like anything extremes, right? So you're going to find some people who just want to be more group. You're going to find some people who want to be more one-on-one. But I think the general middle, let's say 70, 80% of people, they might think they want one or the other, but they really just want the end point. The end point being being able to have coaching and know that they're not the only person going through this.
It is. I heard you mention about your men's group, and it is so satisfying to hear that, because you mentioned emotional regulation and personal regulation, and usually men don't tap into their emotional side. So congratulations on that. But as I'm listening to you, some of our listeners may be asking, what is emotional regulation? What is personal regulation? Is there a difference? So can you just touch on that a little for me?
Sure. I'll even physically show you, and I'll show you that too. That emotional regulation is having the ability to take, and here we go. So martial arts and dance or what. I'm not a dancer, but martial arts and dance have a heavy overlap. So, you have emotions that come to you. And like I mentioned earlier on this, during a call, that these things, they come to you and you can almost feel them. They almost literally push you in certain directions, as in when you're feeling shame or you're feeling doubt or you're feeling angry, right? Who doesn't know what anger feels like at times? Sometimes it feels like it's here and it just comes out, right? Almost at any direction, kind of like fire. It's a very serious thing, right? Especially with men. The fact is, being able to take this kind of, you could call it energy, emotion, what have you, that you're feeling, right? Anxiety, right? The pressure, feel like anxiety, or it feels like it's going in different directions, is you're taking these different kind of notions, these different feelings, and literally redirecting where the energy, where the feeling, where the action is going. So it's emotional regulation is your ability to direct where those emotions, where the energy and action of those emotions are going. That's what that is. Mm-hmm. So instead of being angry that, let's see, professional scenario that you actually didn't get the pay raise that you wanted, or you didn't actually get the recognition that you wanted for some reason, then instead of feeling that and being pushed down by it and feeling resentful, being able to redirect that into something more positive as to, you know what, okay, let me ask for feedback. Let me see why that didn't happen. And at the same time, sure, that's productive, but also it's important to be honest. So do something productive, but also if you feel upset, then feel upset, right? Feel angry. That's okay. So a lot of people, they don't, this is not it's not a separation thing. It's being able to feel your feelings, but at the same time, like I mentioned, they take actions behind it that is more so in a productive and positive way for you and the others around you. That's what that is.
Thank you. Thank you. What are just one step on how to capture those emotions and redirect them? One technique.
One technique is, first of all, a practice. It's a technique, a practice. What you could do is you could practice it alone, right? You sit down, stand up. And what you do is when you're alone, you practice feeling this feeling. right? So whether it's something intense, right? Something angry. So anybody could think of the things that usually anger them or upset them. So what you do is you practice alone that when you have this feeling, pretend that it's coming over to you. And you could do this in front of the mirror of, okay, what do I look like when I actually feel this feeling, when I think these thoughts? And the actual practice is, okay, who am I deciding to be when this happens? Who am I deciding to be when this happens? Right? I could have something very silly, like my colleague was incredibly rude, like is dumb. You could say, what a stupid thing this guy said, or this whoever said, or my partner, right? My romantic partner was just did not understand what I was saying. Why can't you understand what I'm saying? Right? You would practice alone as to when you go through the scenario in your head and look at yourself in the mirror. How do you look? Do you look tense? Do you look, I don't know, do you do certain things with your hands? And you pay attention to these things. And what you do is you practice, okay, when I'm getting like this, I will do this. I will do this. Because just like what we said at the beginning of this call today, of it's a decision. All these things are mini decisions. And how it relates, well, to martial arts is what we feel a lot. Let's say when you're having physical altercation, sometimes if you're not used to these things, you flinch, right? So if you think something's coming towards you, and then even though it's not going to hit you, right? So there's flinching. So what there is within emotions and regular conversation every day, there's a certain amount of emotional flinching that is there. So if someone is prone to being more angry at a certain person or a certain scenario, they already feel it. They're already getting angry because of a certain trigger point that's there, right? But if you have one technique, let's say if that's a technique, because I could talk about this for a long time. But I mean, if you're just focusing, let's say, on one technique, you just do that. Focus as to when you're alone, when you're practicing alone, how you feel alone, and you just keep deciding where you want to be. The last part about that is that that's the same way of how you see in the movies, martial artists go to the mountains and practice alone, right? Where sometimes when you grow up, however you grow up, maybe you don't have a lot of room. So I remember growing up as a kid also, I only have a little bit amount of room to practice moving around, right? Because it wasn't a huge house I was living in. And my father, the same way, he would have this small place, actually, when he was growing up a little bit, to be able to practice his moves, because he practiced when he was younger too. And that's what you need. That's it, just to practice. And that creates dividends, exponential dividends for you.
I think that that's a really great insight, which is creating space for yourself alone, focused, to work through your feelings, your reactions, your emotions, and create for yourself a different reaction process, retrain your brain, so to speak, on something by giving yourself permission to spend that one-on-one time with yourself and work through those emotions. Because I think so often in our society, we're racing around and 8 million things going on at the same time, and you're trying to, keep everybody happy and, not taking that time for yourself. But there's different types of time for yourself, right? There's the time for yourself when you're, sleeping, or as you say, something exciting for yourself getting up in the morning, but some kind of dedicated time, particularly if something really frustrates you or triggers you often, to work on that one-on-one, and the idea of sort of, do it in the bathroom in the mirror and kind of like have that conversation with yourself. I think that's a great insight that you've shared with our listeners and viewers.
Absolutely.
In closing, do you have anything you want to leave with our listeners?
Yes, that it's fact. It's not just some maybe kind of what it's fact that every person who's viewing, who's listening to this, is much more stronger and much more capable than they believe. That's the truth. No matter what anyone is going through, there are other people going through it. That's fine. But you can get through it. All because someone does not know how doesn't mean that it's not possible. My tagline, inner strength, outer results, right? So just keep working on your inner strength and you will create the results that you want.
That's fabulous. How can our listeners get in touch with you and make contact with you and, find out more about what you do for themselves?
Sure, you can reach out to me. My website, it's my first name, last name.com. So Louis Guaman, LuisGuaman.com. You can reach out to me on Instagram. It's Louis Guaman Official. You can LinkedIn me. I'm all over there, and I'm open for having conversations to see how I can help.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today and giving us great insight on how martial arts and business and life come together and can be used to create a better life for ourselves.
Yes, thank you both for having me. You're both great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Transforming Lives panel podcast. We hope that you received some nuggets of wisdom and seeds to plant along your journey of transformation. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we encourage you to let us know and to share us with those that matter in your life. If you would like to connect with anyone from the panel or our guest speaker, you can find all of the ways to connect in our show notes. We have so much gratitude for you, and we are so thankful to be a part of your day. Until next time, take great care.